Vineeta, have you seen the ABCD movie?
Is the Telugu one?
Yeah, the good one.
Yes.
So I didn't watch the movie, but I watched that one clip where idli tindanki kustil. That's the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, ఆ రోజు నేను చూసి almost గుండె అయిపోయింది. I'm not even gonna lie to you. I was in college at the time, so I wasn't living at home. And I screen recorded the video because I couldn't figure out how to save it. And then I sent it to my parents and I said, congratulations, this is not what you raised, because apparently this is what Indian film thinks you raised. Like, what a ridiculous thing. మా అమెరికన్ ఫ్రెండ్స్ ని కూడా ఇండియన్ రెస్టారెంట్ కి తీసుకెళ్లి తినిపిస్తూ ఉంటే వాళ్ళే తినగలుగుతున్నారు అంటే like how I don't know, like how incapable do you have to be in doing your research?
Yeah.
Like I don't know.
Yeah, for anyone who didn't watch that scene, it was pretty much the guy that came from America took 2 idlis and just put it in his mouth, and that's how he thought the idli was supposed to be eaten.
Hey guys, welcome to the Telugu Saga. Dilip, hello no.
బాగున్నా బ్రో.
అసలు ఏం చేస్తున్నావు ఈ మధ్య?
ఈ మధ్య
Yeah.
మంచిగా పడుకుంటున్నా, చాలా తిండి తింటున్నా, అంతే.
సరే అంతే. మందు కూడా సేమ్ పని, సో ఏం చేస్తావు?
నువ్వు కష్టపడుతున్నావుగా వర్క్ లో.
మళ్ళీ నువ్వేం చేస్తున్నావు? నువ్వు కూడా అదే చేస్తున్నావు కదా?
పని చేస్తున్నట్టు నటిస్తున్నా.
నీ కంపెనీకి చెప్పుకోపో.
అదే
సరే కానీ I'm happy today, man. Today we have Sai with us to co-host, and we have a special guest. Sai, అసలు నువ్వు ఈ మధ్య ఏం చేస్తున్నావు? I like your beard. It's been a while. So what's up, man?
Glad to be here, bro. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Just job searching right now, bro. I graduated, and you know how it is. Parents
Congrats.
keep constantly telling you, next ain't tira, and you know, I'm looking, bro.
Graduation life ఇట్లానే ఉంటుంది, bro. It's better to be in college. అసలు stress ఉండదు.
No, nigga.
Yeah. But I'm glad you're doing fine, and congrats on graduating, you know.
Thank you.
It's something, it's such a nice feeling that you spent 4 years or whatever, right? Getting through it, and
finally done, bro.
Good luck on the job search. I know that it's ఇప్పుడు కొంచెం కష్టంగా ఉంది because of pandemic, but I'm sure next few months లో అంత చేంజ్ అవుతుంది, and I'm sure I'll get a good job. So,
yeah.
So Dilip, would you like to talk about our topic and introduce the person for today, special guest for today?
Of course, Vishal. Thank you for a great intro. Today's topic is about how to leverage the idea of growing up in both cultures. We don't choose where to be born, but we get to choose what to embrace, which culture to embrace. Most of us are either born in America or India or wherever it can be. But when we visit or come to either of these countries, we're being labeled as who we are and how we behave. Today's guest is willing to come and share her experience of being so-called ABCD, like many others, and how it has affected her growing up. Vineeta currently resides in Washington and is currently working as an EMT. She graduated with the focus of kinesiology in San Diego State. She has her own podcast called Rowdy Ronnie, in which Vineeta talks about activism and brings in her guests to share their stories. Please check them after this podcast. It's an honor to be collaborating with her. Hi, Vineeta. Welcome. How are you?
There we go. Hey guys, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you for coming on, Vineeta. It's a pleasure to have you. we started to like conversate, right? Like with our intro call, and we got a good vibe already. And we love the fact that you know, you like to speak out. We saw your YouTube channel, Rowdy Rani, and please, guys, you know, watch those videos and subscribe to that. It's really good. But yeah, thank you for coming on our show. And so, Sai, would you like to talk about the in depth about the topic?
So Vineeta, what is the meaning of being an ABCD? And do you encourage the idea of being labeled?
Yeah, so ABCD, obviously, if somebody out there has never heard it, is American Born Confused Baby. So obviously, I was born and raised in the United States. So I heard it a lot growing up, whether it's family members, pinni babais, pedama pednanas, I mean, whoever it is, mana ye situation lo casual ga suddenly, you know, there's a moment where, oh, but you're ABCD ni delete gada. And it's very weird to me because obviously I can speak Telugu. I'm very involved in Indian culture. I have been a dancer for like 14 plus years now. I did singing, I did, you know, performances, all of those things. So I've been really involved. And so it's kind of an odd thing. And I personally think language is really important. Telugu Saga was really exciting because you can speak in Telugu and I can communicate certain things better in Telugu. So that was exciting to begin with. But obviously, you know, language and the way that we speak to people is something that's really important. So I think that I'm not really a fan of ABCD. Obviously, చిన్నపిల్లలప్పటి నుంచి, you know, అట్లాగా brand పెట్టేస్తే పాపం వాళ్ళకి లేనిపోని confusions కూడా మొదలైతాయి. I feel like, you know, like they didn't start by being confused, but you're telling them they're so confused that at some point they're like, oh, maybe I am confused. Like, you know, maybe I have to be confused to be, you know, fit into part of the generation and that sort of thing. So I don't really think it's the best approach. And I think it's really important to be having these conversations and to work on changing that and things like that.
So that's a very interesting approach, Vineeta, because a lot of people come here and then are born here and they're like kind of confused, right? So you said you don't like the branding. What do you think started the branding? Do you have any idea about why this branding started to happen?
Yeah, obviously there's so many things that play into it, right? It's basically a mindset. నా పేరెంట్స్ ఏమో వచ్చారు పాపం వాళ్ళంతా అక్కడే ఇండియాలో పుట్టి పెరిగి మళ్ళీ యుఎస్ వచ్చాక I mean for them it's very fair that it is confusing, right? I can't even fathom moving to an entirely new country, learning how to work in that country, speak the language, and do all of these extra, you know, life skills. So I, you know, constantly, you know, I'm proud that my parents were so daring and they made those steps and they went in that direction. But that being said, said వాళ్ళకున్న confusion is kind of put onto kids, right? Because and I get where it comes from. You know, obviously all of us have that moment of like, ఇంట్లో ఒకలాగా ఉంటాము బయట ఒకలా ఉంటాము ఇంట్లోకి వస్తే ఇంగ్లీష్ మాట్లాడకూడదు అంటారు. So it's like this like constant playing the game, right, of which world are you in. And I think as you get older you get better with it, you know, of turning one switch on, one switch off, one switch on, one switch off. But I think the concept inherently has come from, you know, our parents having to work so hard to assimilate somewhat into this culture at the same time, you know, keeping our Indian roots and all of that preserved as best as they can. So with that being an experience that maybe they haven't been through before, they haven't seen anyone else go through before, I think that kind of like jump started it, right? And then it's obviously perpetuated by film. I think it's ridiculous, you know. Like, I mean, I can literally probably quote some movies, American Introduction, and it's like, it's just such a, it is a branding, right? Because it sells what they want to sell, right? But I just think all of those sorts of things slowly play into it. And then maybe people that are moving, you know, around now or recently, when they've seen these films, it gets even worse because we just keep rolling it and perpetuating it into like this bigger and bigger issue.
I completely understand what you're saying because they make it seem like all we care about is like money and we don't like show family values or like religious like views. They just kind of think of like, oh, he's from America. All he wants to do is make money, for himself, and that's all he cares about.
Yeah, I recently was watching a movie called Pressure Cooker with my family. I don't know if you guys have seen it. I loved it. I think it was a really great film in general. But there's obviously a certain group of the characters that are in America and they're immigrants and then their kids are born there. And his mama is like, "Intra jesa ani," immediate ka kopadtaru. And then the lady comes through, and this is the biggest confusion for me. Oh, attagaru meer ala ella antaru America lo anta valla parents maatrame tittochu inkevaru tittakodu. And I was like, dude, I wish that was true, because the number of times I've gotten in trouble from every other relative in my family is ridiculous, right? Like, I don't even know where that comes from. Like, if people distort the fact that, spanking or child abuse is not allowed in this country to the fact that, like, we can't discipline kids. And it's a little concerning, right? Because there's so much in between those 2 points. But that was such a weird thing. And I remember Chustunapre, I was like so confused. And I looked at my parents and they looked at me and we just didn't know what was happening, right? So film, there's this rhetoric matters, right? The way that we talk about it, the way that we put it out there, the characters that we create, it's so important. And film is, an extremely centric part of Indian culture. We have such a huge film industry, be it North Indian, be it South Indian. And, unfortunately, people are going to be influenced by it. And so you need to be aware of what you're putting out there. Like, I've had guys message me and then quote direct movie lines and they think it works to get somebody's attention, or I don't know, to make somebody fall in love with you. And it's just, we have to be really aware what we're putting out in media. And I think that's a huge issue that I see and as a recurrent.
It's just crazy how, like, we are being labeled and, going through all this mess, right? How do you think you want to, like, overcome it? And do you think that, what do you think we should do in this situation? Because for us who've been through, not everybody has that confusion anymore, but especially while growing up in the childhood stages, we see that notion and we see it in movies too, right? Especially in Telugu movies, they have like a little bit more cinematic liberties. So with that sense, it's really hard because we're like, oh, where are we being influenced? Are we not? We don't know. So what do you think is a solution to this?
I think as families, I think it's really important going forward, that when we are spending time within the world of Indian culture, we have pujas, days that you're doing something special, or even day-to-day life, I think there needs to be obviously a very strong inclusion of that. That being said, sometimes, and it's like you're making groups and you're teaching your child that you make groups, right? And it inherently will put them off from interacting with them. Obviously, you're friends with whoever is there and you have to interact with whoever is there. But that being said, we need to stop drawing ourselves as a different group. Yeah, obviously we're going to be different. There's no way around it, right? We have a different culture. But after that, is ikkada pillale ala chestaru, mana pillalu ala cheyaru. The minute you start saying things like that, you're telling them that one culture is bad, and that's what the confusion is, right? So if both cultures are embraced, like, okay, మన ఇంట్లో ఉన్నప్పుడు మనం ఇలా ఉంటాము, we follow specific things, that's fine. But నువ్వు బయటికి వెళ్ళినప్పుడు, or if నువ్వు బయటికి వెళ్ళాలనుకుంటే, there are things that you're allowed to do, which is also fine. ఒక రకమైన భయం ఉంటుందన్నమాట. వాళ్ళు వెస్టర్న్ థింగ్స్ చేస్తున్నారు, మన కల్చర్ అంతా మర్చిపోతారు, మన భాష మాట్లాడలేరు, and all of these sorts of things. But for me, like, my dad would literally do this if I started talking in English for like the first 9 years of my life. He was like, time out, Telugu, 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 constantly. And appudu naaku obviously chaala chiraga anpichedi kada, I'm just trying to tell a story about a kid in school. But now I've grown to appreciate it so much more because I can switch between the language. I can communicate with people that can't speak in English, that only speak in Telugu. So I think obviously I don't endorse that as the best way, Dad, if you're watching, I'm sorry. I think it was a way that worked for him and for his specific style. But I think those sorts of things, right? Manam iche culture ni manam baga ardham cheskoni manam baga chadivi, if we can pass it on in a way that really instills meaning to what we're passing on, then I believe that that has so much security in and of itself that no matter how much, Western influence takes over, it's not taking away from culture, it's only adding, right? And I think similarly, ఇప్పుడు మన Indian social cultures లో కొన్ని, there are some things a lot of the time we're maybe not as straightforward as we could be. Passive aggression is a big thing. But being so immersed in Western culture, I'm more comfortable with voicing my viewpoint because I don't have that same mentality all of the time. I'm happy with saying what I think in a respectful way, right? So I think there's always good things to take from both. But I think that within our homes, if we can really build an own connection first for ourselves and then be able to pass that on to the next generation in something that's meaningful to them, I think that's the start of kind of reconciling this ABCD thing. And honestly, I think, by the time our generation has kids, like, I can't call my kids that because technically I am that too. So, I mean, I think it kind of will burn itself out eventually, I hope.
I also want to add on that some of the Western culture was actually good for like people in India. Like I felt that after people went out to wherever country to like get a job or whatever, they understand that, or they come to a realization that there is more that they can learn from the other government, right? Because let's say America, for example, people talk about certain issues that people in India don't talk about at all. They give awareness to Black Lives Matter right now, and they talk about like women's rights, all that stuff, which wasn't even a thought in India. So people from the Western culture come back to India to try to bring that to India in order to better themselves. So I think that's like one of the positives that have come from Western culture.
In the other way, you could see it as when international students come here, right? They still have those traditional values, and sometimes being like raised here, not everybody is gonna follow the religion or like kind of take the time to appreciate their traditional values. So I think it's really nice that when international students come here, right, they kind of showcase, they kind of like publicize our culture. And sometimes that could be good for the people here because you really shouldn't forget your roots, right? Like even though you may not have lived in India, at least like, your parents come from there, and those are the values that you try to share. So I think that's also a good point. One of the questions I want to ask you is, what was your interaction with like an international student or someone coming from India? Was there any clash between your guys' mentalities?
Oh my gosh, there was so much. So to give background, I was a part of the Indian Student Association for like 3 years in college. And one of the years I served as vice president. So I did a lot of presentations, not only for my organization, but also school-wide. So I presented and hosted diversity programs for my university, which was a great experience. But in that way, I think a lot of people knew my face and I didn't know them. So it kind of set me off on the back foot. I didn't really like know who I was interacting with, but they kind of had an idea of who I was. But I think one of the moments that was really striking to me was, obviously recently Vinayak Chavithi just happened, and so last year or 2 years ago, I guess, I had a huge group of friends who were from Mumbai. So obviously in Mumbai, Vinayak Chavithi is a really, really big deal. వాళ్ళు 9 రోజులు వినాయకుడిని పెట్టి ఆరతి చేసి then after that they do the rest of so I identify as a religious person and a spiritual person. So I went every day, do the arti and all of that thing. And I was sitting and one day I happened to wear, actually I wore it every day at the time, so I don't know why this person was surprised, but I had a pendant that had a like Vinayak on it. And ఏదో నేను కూర్చొని మాట్లాడుతున్నాను ఎవరితో casual గా, and this guy like just comes and sits down and he just looks at me. He was like, do you like even know what you're celebrating? Like, have you ever celebrated this before, like in your house, or like you're just here for like show? And I was like, అంటే అలా కూడా అడుగుతారా నాకు ఆ క్షణంలో I was so weirded out by this man's inquiry. And I was like, yeah, of course we do stuff at home. We do pujas at home, you know. This year I got up with my mom and, you know, tried to help her make things and whatever, right? But I think it's a very unfortunate mindset that being connected to your roots only happens in one set of ways, right? We have a list. ఇలాంటివి చేస్తేనే మనం కల్చర్కి కనెక్ట్ అయినట్టు లేకపోతే లేదు. And I think that's something that's sort of passed on as well. Sometimes, you know, our parents tell us things that, I don't know, they don't make sense to me. And my first instinct is to say, oh, why? And it's not to be rude. I want to know, right? Because నేను ఒక్కొక్కసారి ఇండియాలో లేకపోతే some of those things that we don't build as deep a connection. So to me, it's important. I only ask why because I want to build my own connection to it, right? And I think in India, those questions don't happen. Oh, పెద్దవాళ్ళు చెప్పారు మేము ఫాలో అయిపోతాం అంతే, మేము ఇట్లా చిన్నప్పుడు ఏం క్వశ్చన్స్ అడగలేదు. Like I'm so sure we've heard that from every single one of our parents. I mean, I've heard it endlessly from my parents. So I think that that sort of mentality is just, okay, they package something to me and it's called culture, then they put it in my hands, then next generation వచ్చినప్పుడు నేను ఆ డబ్బా తీసుకెళ్ళి అట్లాగే పెట్టేస్తాను, and there's really nothing beyond that. But I think our culture, you know, if you are religious, there's so much behind that that's really been lost in history that hasn't been carried forward. So I think I have a very personal connection to my religion and my culture, and a lot of that comes through dancing. It comes through performing, and I do a lot of meditation when I'm learning dances and things like that. So yeah, I've had moments where, you know, international students were like, do you even know what you're talking about? And I was like, yes, because I'm Indian. Like, because I was brought up here, that doesn't allow you to come to me in a disrespectful way to ask that question. I think it's very fair if you're like, oh, you know, how does your family celebrate? Do you celebrate in general? It's fine, but are you doing it for show? Are you doing it for, they asked me if I was doing it for fashion. I was like, I'm sorry, I wouldn't wear like my God that I believe in as a fashion statement, but you know, so that's the thing, right? You have to focus on language. You can ask questions and there's obviously going to be people of different mindsets, but you have to not be demeaning when you ask those questions, and that's the important part.
We have the problem of this predefined notion that we talked about yesterday. Maybe if he had gotten to know you better, that you do celebrate, you do say who you are, maybe he would have said, okay, then that's why she's probably wearing that necklace or that pendant. In our group or like community, if an individual is born in America, okay, he's probably whitewashed, he or she's whitewashed, she doesn't know the culture. That whole ideas come through, and then once you meet, man, they actually know how to speak Telugu. Like that's why all our Indian parents back in America, like some people are who are born in America do talk pretty well in Telugu, and they're just surprised by it. So we just have to go past of assumptions.
Yeah, I've had moments where, I mean, I go to India or people from India come visit and they don't even ask me, they'll ask my parents, as if I can't even like basic understand what they're saying to me. They'll be like, oh, pilla Telugu maatladtunda, and like they say it like a weird secret, and I'm like, I'm right here, like I can understand, I can respond to you like fine. And so it's come to the point where like my mom has just given up and like trying to respond to the question, and then I'll just kind of jump in and be like, అవునండి తెలుగు బానే వస్తుంది మీకు ఇంగ్లీష్ రాదా, like I don't know what are we asking the question here for. But you know, it happens, you know, and I speak pretty decent Hindi too, like as a result of being around the international students all the time and everybody spoke in Hindi. So you know, people would like talk about me or talk about stuff related to me in front of me, like, oh, you don't know, right? And then they'll like explain it and like, no, I'm fine, thanks, like I don't need the subtitles again. So yeah, I think, you know, when you walk in the door with a lot of assumptions, you don't allow yourself to think past them unless somebody says it in a very sort of jarring way, which is not always the best option as well.
I've had some bitter experiences and I've had some nice experiences with that kind of stuff, because I've had people like when we talk to them, like on the phone, right? Like especially people from India, some of them were like, "Oh, me pilotki Telugu cha." Like they'll say it in such a way that we think, like, why would they ask that question? Like, if we can't, we'll speak in whatever we can, right? But there are some people that are really sweet. They actually tried to speak in English for me, and then I noticed that they were struggling, and then I'm just be like, "Ayyo parledu naku Telugu vastadi. You can anta Telugulone maatladochu," and I cheptam. So that's how we gotta. I've I've seen both, good and bad in that sense, but I think everybody relates to that because it happens a lot.
Right. And I mean,
Yeah.
it's all about the approach, right? I've also had family members who కష్టపడి ఇంగ్లీష్లో మాట్లాడుతున్నారు, and I'm like, it's fine. తెలుగులో మాట్లాడండి, it's okay. I had a cousin in India who, my sister is like 9 years younger than me. So he and him were closer in age. నేను ఇండియాకి వెళ్ళినప్పుడు తెలుగులో మాత్రమే మాట్లాడతాను, లేకపోతే వాళ్ళకి తెలిసిపోతుంది నువ్వు యుఎస్ నుంచి వచ్చావు and all of this thing, which I don't know why that's a big secret, but okay. And so my sister was speaking in English because that's sort of where she's more comfortable. And my cousin went up to my mom, అక్కకి ఇంగ్లీష్ రాదా, చెల్లి చూడు ఎంత బాగా మాట్లాడుతుందో, అక్కకు ఒక ముక్క ఇంగ్లీష్ రాదు. And he was like 4 and I was like, what? నేనేదో కల్చర్డ్ గా ఉందాం అనుకుని తెలుగులో మాట్లాడుతుంటే it's like backfiring on me. But there's always those misconceptions, and avi undakunda kuda you're never going to encounter a situation, right? When people of different cultures are coming together, you're going to have it, but it's important, again, how you use your words and your rhetoric. And I think a lot of the time, especially manaki direct translation lo ardhamevi kind of sounds weird to us, but it's normal for the person who's saying it. Like someone was giving me a compliment, I think, like, "Oh, Papa, picky ba kashpadtundi." But I'm like, picky ante naak insulting ane anpistundi, right? I mean, you're supposed to be saying something good. Why don't we just go with good, right? Why do we need to add these extra masala flavors of something else happening? So I think that it's an interesting thing. And I think, to this day, my mom will, there's some saying she says, she's going to be upset that I got it wrong. Like, "Kodi guttu midi ee kalpekadam," or something like that. Like, you're just being really picky. And I'm like, but I can be picky on the way that somebody communicates to me. So, enta bhasha ochina kuda there are some colloquialisms that I think like we're not going to understand. And I've made peace with that. So, but it's always going to be different. It's always going to be interesting, right? Just being respectful and learning the right ways to approach those situations is something that's going to be great and be healthy and taking us forward.
In the end, you get to decide if you want to continue the culture. Just because if you're born here and you're Telugu, and if you can speak Telugu and English, and back home, మా అబ్బాయి బుద్ధిగా ఉంటాడు, మన practices follow అవుతాడు, he's చాలా మంచి అబ్బాయి, you're still a good person even if you don't do that. And so just decide, you got to embrace it. Do you like English because you came here from India? Go with it. Don't let our culture stop you. And you came here for a reason. You want to live here. You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing, right? About when we talk about definitions and words, it's also important that we don't define like traditional Indian boy, traditional Indian girl as the only good version, because that's not true. You can't come to a different country and expect that somebody's going to follow through with the lifestyle of a different country. And I say this all the time. My parents are living in a nice imaginary microcosm of what India was maybe like 20 years ago. ఇప్పుడు ఇండియాను అలా లేదు, యుఎస్ అలా లేదు, మధ్యలో మనం ఇరుక్కున్నాం అనమాట, like just thinking in that sphere, because that's what it is, right? My mom will go back and be like, "Oh my god, prices ఇంత పెరిగిపోయా, ఇలా మాట్లాడతారా," and they're also shocked going back now. So it's a very narrow-minded and a very, like I said, it's a pre-packaged belief that's passed on. And a lot of the times it's unfortunate, but our parents lived in a survival generation, right? You had maybe 3 jobs that will get you money, and out of those 3, maybe 2 will get you to the States or somewhere foreign where you can make more money and be more efficient with your time. And avi kaakunda, they didn't have anything. They didn't get to explore themselves. They didn't get to explore what their culture means and how they're related to it. So ప్రీ-ప్యాకేజ్డ్ బిలీఫ్స్ సిస్టమ్స్ అలా వచ్చేస్తున్నాయి కాబట్టి వాళ్ళు తీసేసుకుంటున్నారు. బట్ ఐ థింక్ we're in a generation where we're asking the questions why. చెప్పు, నేను ఇన్సల్టింగ్ అడగట్లేదు. I want to understand it on a deeper level, because I think ultimately whatever you choose, like you were saying, right, you can choose Indian, you can choose Western, you can choose something in the middle, but you have to be very deeply connected. That's what it is you need to make that connection for yourself. And I think when it comes out that way, then you're so much more secure in that grounding. And maybe in the future, if your kid or somebody else in your family decides to go down a different path, that's fine. You feel secure and you've given them what you feel like they needed to get growing up. And then, we move past it. Obviously, everybody's going to be different balances of American and Indian and whitewashed and desi, whatever it is, right? But that's kind of up to us. And I think that it needs to be something that's more empowering, that it's up to us. It's empowering that we get to decide what to do with it. You guys are out here doing something so cool. You're having a podcast where I can talk in Telugu, which is not common for me if I'm having these sorts of deep discussions, right? And you're bringing issues out, you're having conversations. That's something that you guys decided to do with your own balance of, white and desi, whatever you want to call it. But I think it's empowering. And I think that, we're making a lot of strides in the right direction. So it's really important to not pick what's good and pick what's bad. And sometimes I think parents, they're proud of their kids. And I think they want to have that ammunition in public to say, oh, maavadu itla chestadu, ma kuturu itla chestundi. And I'm like, my parents don't really follow that norm. So I don't really know what they would say, but I'm kind of against the grain of the standard, Indian girl who's kind of quiet and docile and does what she's supposed to do, because it's just not how I've ever operated. My parents have never forced me to operate that way. So, I think the good, the manchdi, adi tappu, adi chedu, those kind of words, man, are just so detrimental at the end of the day, right? There's very few black and white things that are right and wrong or good or bad. Then after that, I think we need to start letting go, to let our future generations, our generation, sort of decide where that boundary lies.
Dude, I totally agree with everything she said. She took one point and made such good assumptions.
She nailed it. Yeah.
She nailed it, yeah. I was gonna add something about it, but she took my point away too, and I was like, okay, you're nailing it.
I was on debate club, guys, for a year. Okay, I'm sorry.
I can't even debate back. She literally took all the arguments away.
Same feeling ikkada.
She had just speechless.
Yeah, I had thoughts I was just thinking about some things, and then I realized you kind of brushed upon most of the things, so it's just kind of hard to come up with anything to say. But yeah.
Vineeta, have you seen the ABCD movie?
Is the Telugu one?
Yeah, the Telugu one.
Yes.
So I didn't watch the movie, but I watched that one clip where idli tindanki kustil. That's the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I రోజు నేను చూసి almost గుండె అయిపోయింది. I'm not even gonna lie to you. I was in college at the time, so I wasn't living at home. And I screen recorded the video because I couldn't figure out how to save it. And then I sent it to my parents and I said, congratulations, this is not what you raised, because apparently this is what Indian film thinks you raised. What a ridiculous thing. My American friends ni kuda Indian restaurant ki తీసుకెళ్ళి తినిపిస్తూ ఉంటే వాళ్ళే తినగలుగుతున్నారు అంటే how, I don't know, how incapable do you have to be in doing your research?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, for anyone who didn't watch that scene, it was pretty much the guy that came from America took 2 idlis and just put it in his mouth, and that's how he thought the idli was supposed to be eaten.
అలా తీసుకొని ఇట్లా ముంచుకుంటాడు కూడా, just straight whole idli.
Yeah, I think the girl taught him how to do it afterwards.
మళ్ళీ అదొక రొమాన్స్. అది మనం అట్లా చూపించాలి కదా. It's not oh, okay, నేను నీకు నేర్పిస్తాను, అది రొమాంటిక్ గా నేర్పింది. That's such a weird thing, I think Indian films have this very weird aspect about American-born Indians being very open to romantic relationships. and it's very uncomfortable because వాళ్ళు సినిమాల్లో అలా చూపిస్తారు and they feel like it's not going to affect anybody, but like I will raise my hand and say that I have been approached very uncomfortably by men, either online, which almost felt safer because it's like, okay, whatever, I can block you, but also in person, and just no like regard for my personal boundaries. You know, I had a guy just very clearly was like, oh yeah, American girls like this, right? Like, this is your normal. And I was like, oh my God, no, like this is nobody's normal, you know, like this is not an appropriate way to behave. And it's just, I don't know what kind of permission they feel like they're getting from these films or whatever, but
Dude, all the time, because my sister, when she goes back to India, like every like guy just thinks that they can, you know, try to talk to her as if, you know, like she's easy or something, you know. It just kind of gets annoying for her too. Like it just feels very weird because most of them are relatives, and I don't want to get into it, but like it's just kind of like I don't like it at all.
right. And I think the minute that a girl is outgoing or will have a conversation with you, it's like, oh my God, నాకు అసలు పడిపోయింది, నేను చాలా హీరోలా ఉంటాను, all this. And I'm like, ఏ ప్రపంచంలో బతుకుతున్నావు dude, like this is not what's happening at all. నేనేదో మంచిగా ఉండడానికి కాన్వర్సేషన్ చేసుకుంటూ ఉంటే like you're going in that direction, and it's like, it's weird. You almost like lose faith in in the sorts of people you're talking to.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, that's where some of these notions come from that we've been discussing, these preconceived notions. It's sad, but I've experienced it. And you know, like you said, your sister, 98% of women probably have experienced some, you know, guy sliding into her DMs, or you know, guy in person who thinks that American women have no personal boundaries and you know they'll be fine. And it was just, God, I still like shudder thinking about those encounters. It was terrible. Like, that's the permission that we're giving young men in India with the films that we're showing them, right? Like, oh, amma venakala long enough padte then padipotar. Like some guy, word for word, said to me, a girl will fall for a guy, if not immediately, but definitely. These are the words that were said to me.
That was from a movie line too.
Telugu movie.
I know. Ekkado vinnattunde. I know it's from somewhere, and I was like, what?
It could be from all of them.
Well, yeah, probably. I mean,
It's usually the guy going for the girl, and you know, he keeps on trying, and eventually, after like a fight scene, it works apparently.
suddenly అమ్మాయి పడిపోతుంది. Suddenly every character flaw is irrelevant, and then she's like, oh my God, నా జీవితమే లేదు. And like,
Yeah.
ఒక అబ్బాయి నీ ముందులో ఏమంటే నువ్వు ఎలా రెస్పాండ్ అవుతావు?
నా ముందు ఇట్లా అంటేనా? No, I think I just stare at him really blankly. Like, what does somebody say to that?
Amma.
Mental hospital lo చేర్చినా, like I can help. I mean, it's just a blatant disrespect. You know what I'm saying? Like, honestly, I'd probably ask them if it ever worked. That would probably be my first question. నువ్వు ముందు ఏమైనా అమ్మాయితో ఎట్లా కానీ యాక్చువల్లీ వర్కౌట్ అయ్యేలా నీకు? That would be my honest question. I think I would let's pick that.
Honestly, we should turn this into an advice show. We should just get
if you guys
Indian. Let's just get Indian girls to come here, and then you know they'll tell us how, or tell the guys how to behave.
100%. And I actually have this. If my personal Instagram is on public, so which is a new thing. My sister convinced me to do it, but I always post, you know, stories and things like that, which is talking about this, you know, toxic masculinity and all of that sort of things. And if it's anything related to brown guys, I will always post. My inbox is open. Feel free to message me.
All right, what's your Instagram?
It's well, it's really embarrassing. Vineet, and then there's 4 A's and an H, but there's not actually an H at the end of my name. That's just
wait. Vinte.
Vineeteaah.
You're literally doing it in the middle of a podcast.
Yeah, type it. No,
amazing.
Come hang out. But no, I do that because a lot of the times it's almost, you know, kind of scary to ask a girl, I think, you know, even if she's just your friend, right? You're not trying to ask them in a intimate aspect or anything, but is this okay? Is my behavior okay? Or is there something that like, you know, is coming off poorly to you? And I think that it's hard for women to open up and have that conversation because frankly, you know, we have been hurt and we have been made to be, you know, victims in a lot of situations. But I always am very open to having this discussion, and the people who've always responded have been guys that have moved from India to here every single time.
Yeah. And then we make memes about it too.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know, memes, comedies, social media culture exists, right? I mean, there's only certain amount of boundaries that we can draw. But I think that being consumers, you know, you consume what you think is appropriate. I don't go around liking memes that are derogatory to women. I don't like memes that are derogatory to men. You know, I don't, you know, give them my consumership, I guess. But yeah, it is tough, right? Social media navigating that realm. But yeah, so I've definitely had a lot of interesting conversations with people who've moved here from India. So that's been interesting as well.
So coming back to the topic, right? You know, it's like you're trying to leverage something from both cultures. And I really loved what you talked about in the introduction call yesterday. What is something that you take from like our Indian culture, especially the like being specific the Telugu culture and then the culture here? What do you take the best out of?
I think in general in Indian culture, like I said, I consider myself religious, and so in times in my life that I've had a really difficult time or I'm struggling to cope with anything, I have looked to my religion, my culture. There have been very specific stories and things that I've learned and meditated on in dance that give me immense strength to go through whatever situation I'm in. You know, I've learned a lot from analyzing those sorts of things. So in general, with Indian culture, I think that's something. Specifically Telugu culture, I love this language. I genuinely enjoy it so much. And I think I can really communicate my affection or my caring towards somebody better in my own language, which is Telugu. So I love the communication aspect of Telugu. I love being able to speak different languages and, you know, interact with different people. There was a time where I was in an elevator with, you know, people that spoke 3 different languages, and then I just went like 1, 2, 3 and kind of knocked them all out. So, you know, language is really important to me. So that's something, you know, from Telugu culture that I've taken. And honestly, from Western culture, I think it's introspection and awareness is a big thing for me. Not just accepting something like I was saying because it's prepackaged and given to me with a neat little bow on top. That's not enough, right? As well as, you know, learning, being aware of like, this is my personal boundary. It doesn't matter who the other person is, but you can't really cross that line with me. And learning how to respectfully say those things. I think a lot of the time, growing up, it's a sign of disrespect. Or లేదమ్మా కాసేపు నన్ను వదిలేసే అంటాం. It's like, oh, నేను నీ తల్లి నువ్వు నన్నలా అంటావు నేను నిన్ను కన్నాను, and then we go into this whole epic backstory, right? So I think a lot of the times honestly from my American like Caucasian friends, I've learned how they set boundaries. I mean, be that with their friends, but especially with parents and family members, and being able to communicate that to them. So yeah, I think I thoroughly enjoy the dichotomy that I live in, right? And I enjoy leveraging both ends of it. And I've never failed to find something beautiful in each side of it. But I'm Indian, so that's what I identify as, and that's what I'm going to be for the rest of my life. And, you know, I do things and stay in touch with that in ways that are meaningful to me. And I think that's what matters.
That's a where like you said it perfectly, and it's just amazing to see people like you know, speaking like this. And I appreciate you coming on our podcast. And before we, you know, disperse, we want to do a rapid fire round. So
Ready.
It's gonna be the most intense questions, and it's gonna make you sweat. And
I'm already sweating. Okay, I'm prepared.
No, I'm kidding. It's just gonna be like some small questions, but one of the questions that we had was, what do you occasionally do to keep yourself in the Telugu culture?
I honestly watch a lot of movies, and I know I totally was saying movies kind of suck sometimes, which they do. But I watch a lot of movies. That's how my vocabulary increased as a kid, and like that's sort of it's a family bonding thing for me too. It's really easy for me. I definitely watch movies, but also I'm always looking to find new movies that are not within that standard track. Basically, any East Asian movie I'm a huge fan of. But yeah, I watch a lot of movies, and I dance.
During this pandemic, like, what have you been doing the last few months? And is there something that you haven't done yet that you are really wanting to do?
Yeah, I've been weirdly busy. Like I wasn't expecting to be this busy, but like I said, I've been applying to med school, so that's a 1 year process. So I've definitely been like knee deep in that, which has been exciting and nerve wracking, obviously. And then I also launched Rowdy Rani, which was something that was in the back of my head for a really, really long time. So I got a great friend on board to help me out in that initial planning bit and working with that. I started working as an EMT, which has been a very telling experience on American healthcare and patient care. I've been yelled at by many psych patients so far, so it's only the beginning of that journey. So those are the things that I think I've so far done, and I'm working on obviously building my brand and my platform. That being said, one thing that I really, really want to get into is like meditation and like doing more research into things like that, meditation, law of attraction, energy things, Reiki. I actually listened to another podcast about that recently, and it like blew my mind. And I'm very much, I mean, I am pre-med and I do have very strong faith in the hard sciences or whatever, but I think there's a lot in our culture and religion that's based on science that we don't actually know of.
If you're interested in that kind of stuff, we actually did a podcast with someone named Akila, and she actually has a website called Our Hidden Layers, and that's where she posts a bunch of like meditation, spiritualism, a bunch of like cool things that you can kind of look into, and she shares her own story. So if you could also look at that. I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, I remember watching a portion of her episode, but I don't think I actually like had written that website.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. Just like growing that community and being around those people is something that's really exciting to me. So yeah, definitely steps in that direction.
That's pretty cool. And I'll ask a last question, and then Dilip will wrap up with the podcast. But is there someone that inspires you other than your parents? Like it could be like a celebrity, it could be a friend, it could be someone.
Honestly, I'm somebody that looks for inspiration in everyone and everything, and I more often than not I find it. That being said, I think my mind is really on my platform right now, and obviously building connections with great people like you guys and all of that. So this is really geeky, but I'm a super big Harry Potter fan, and Emma Watson is kind of like my largest celebrity crush, just because I think she was obviously a child actor, which comes with its baggage of its own. She's grown so beautifully out of it. She has picked really important films and very well educated. She's very well read, very well educated. She studied at Brown. If you don't know, like about her. So she studied at Brown. She does Goodwill, like UN Goodwill Ambassador work. She's been working on feminism and gender inequality and fighting for gender equality.
Harry Potter. I wish I haven't. I came here when I was 10, did not have time to do Harry Potter. So if that person inspires you, okay.
I feel like you're finding it really hard to be nice to me because I do. I mean, everyone has their choice. So.
Sorry, she's our guest to behave.
Yes. Guys, if you're listening, if you can get anything out of this podcast, what Vineeta said, believe in what you're doing. We're all are being labeled, from caste systems to communities and then we have our own separate languages, mixing well. There's so much you can learn from each other.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you're making me cry.
So guys, and thank you all for your time. Thank you, Vineeta. You're such a wonderful, uplifting guest, and I loved your Telugu. I can speak as much Telugu as you are, but I think the more we talk, I think the interaction will become much more comfortable and eased in.
Yeah, no, it was really great, and thank you guys for having me. Obviously, being Telugu and Telugu culture is really important to me, so it's very exciting to get to showcase that and put that out there and discuss thoughts with like-minded people.
Yeah, and thank you, Sai, for being our co-host. Uh, all right, guys, we'll catch you on an episode next week. Vishal, do you have anything to say?
I just want to say thank you, Vineeta. I know we don't have to be too formal, but it's just one of those things where person that comes on our podcast, we got to appreciate because they take the time to actually come out, speak with us, and connect with us. And this is something that Sai and I, or Dilip and I, have been doing for a while, for the last like 4 or 5 months now, and we want to continue this journey. So I appreciate you coming on our podcast, and hopefully we want to entertain the like next week. So we look forward for another guest, and thank you guys for coming on our show.